This video is sponsored by Squarespace. Hello and welcome to this episode of Night Sky News for June 2024 with me, astrophysicist Dr. Becky Smethurst. This is a show where we chat about what you should look out for in the night sky in the next few weeks, and then we chat about what's been happening in space news in the past few weeks. In this episode, we're chatting about the solar storm on Mars that the Curiosity rover spotted, plus how the Hubble Space Telescope is back up and running again, but with only one gyroscope for its scientific operations, and then finally this galaxy spotted by the James Webb Space Telescope, which could be the most distant galaxy ever found, with the light taking 13.4 billion years to get to us. As usual, there's chapter markers down here if you want to skip ahead to any specific news story, plus any scientific research papers I mentioned will all be linked in the video description down below, free to read. So without any further ado, let's kick things off and start by looking up. Now, one of the best things about this time of year is the incredible view we have of the center of our galaxy, the Milky Way, right now, stretching out across the sky from the southwest directly overhead and fading into the northeast. But the annoying thing about this time of the year, especially for those of us quite far north in the northern hemisphere, is that we have very short nights in which to enjoy the view of the Milky Way, because the Milky Way is really quite faint, so you need a very dark sky to spot it. Why it looks so spectacular is because you have hundreds of thousands of stars on the other side of our galaxy that are too faint to see individually, and instead you get this collective glow of them all together. But it only appears when you get away from the bright lights of a city, or even the bright lights of your house, going from inside where it's incredibly bright to outside where it's dark. You've got to give your eyes time to adjust so that you can see faint things. So if you're planning a trip this summer, perhaps somewhere dark or perhaps further south where they've got longer nights, give your eyes at least 15 minutes to adjust the darkness so that you can pick out these fainter things, and hopefully you'll see the Milky Way arching overhead. Of course, if you're in the southern hemisphere where you've got shorter days and longer nights at the minute, then you're going to have the absolute best conditions, especially because the center of the Milky Way, which has way more stars, so it's much brighter and you can see much more detail in the dust and the gas, that'll be much higher in the sky for you as well. I've made a video before about why the southern hemisphere has a better view of the center of the Milky Way, so check that out if you're interested. And of course, the Milky Way is a fantastic thing to try and capture either with your phone or with a camera on a tripod. If you've never done that before, I've got a video with astrophotography tips that I'll link below for you to check out. Now, spotting the Milky Way is something that you really have to stay up late for, whereas the other sights of the night sky right now are something that you unfortunately have to get up early for. So all the planets are stacked on one side of the solar system right now, which means we can only see them when we look in that direction, which happens to be just before the sun rises. So the planets you should be able to spot right now with your naked eye are Jupiter, Mars, and Saturn. Jupiter is the brightest, but it is closest to the horizon, so it might get a bit washed out in the glow of the sunrise, depending on how far north you are anyway. Mars is the next one up with a reddish glow, and then Saturn higher again, which means it will actually rise the earliest of all three of these, and it has that characteristic yellowish glow. And if you're not sure which one is which, the moon handily will act as a marker at the end of June and beginning of July. So on the morning of the 28th and 29th of June, the half moon will be closest to Saturn. Then on the 1st and 2nd of July, the crescent moon will be closest to Mars. And then by the morning of the 3rd of July, the tiny sliver of a crescent moon that I like to call a toenail moon will be closest to Jupiter. Uranus is also between Jupiter and Mars, but you'll need a telescope to pick that one out, and it's slightly bluish glow. You won't be able to see it with just your eyes. But you can see the Pleiades star cluster, which is also between Jupiter and Mars, that looks like a sort of a mini version of the Plough or the Big Dipper constellation, making this part of the sky extra beautiful right now. Of course, to see it here in the UK, I'd either have to stay up past 2 a.m.
Nothing good happens after 2 a.m.
Or I have to set an alarm to wake me up at 3 a.m. before the sun rises, neither of which sound particularly appealing to me. But the further south you are, the later the sun will rise for you, and so the later in the morning you'll actually be able to catch these in the sky. Then one more thing before we get to space news. Earth reaches its furthest point from the sun on the 5th of July this year, what's known as Aphelion. So the Earth's orbit around the sun isn't a perfect circle, it's slightly oval shaped with the sun not quite in the middle. So in January, we're on the part of our orbit closest to the sun, around about 147 million kilometers away. And in July, we're about 152 million kilometers away from the sun. So about 5 million kilometers further away than we are in January. It means the sun also looks about 3.6% smaller on the sky in July than it does in January, but it's not a big enough difference for us to notice with like just our eyes. Of course, you should never look at the sun directly with your eyes. Always make sure you have the proper kit. And I always like to bring this up because I tend to find that people think that like being further away or closer to the sun is what would give us our seasons, but nope. Our seasons are caused by the tilt in the Earth's axis. So in the northern hemisphere summer, the North Pole points towards the sun, which concentrates the sun's light over a smaller area, therefore warming it up. And then in northern hemisphere winter, the North Pole points away from the sun, meaning the sun's light is spread out over a larger area and therefore it's colder. And I think it's just fun to know that while we're all going about our days on the 5th of July, that Earth is also 5 million kilometers further away than the sun than it was 6 months ago. All right, that's it for what to look for in the night sky for this month. But before we chat about what's been happening in space news, all of you out there with small businesses or side hustles or who need a professional website for whatever reason, you've got to check out the sponsor of today's video, Squarespace. Squarespace is the all-in-one website platform that makes it easy to create a beautiful, professional-looking website. You can start a completely personalized website with their new guided design system known as Squarespace Blueprint, which lets you choose from professionally curated layout and styling options to build a unique online presence from the ground up that's tailored to your brand or business and also optimized for every type of device. Plus, once you've launched your website, you can get discovered fast with integrated search engine optimization tools, so you show up more often to more people. And what I think makes Squarespace stand out and why I think you'll love it is how easy it is to sell products with Squarespace. They make checking out seamless for your customers. So they've got simple, powerful payment tools with everything from credit cards, PayPal, and Apple Pay. But also in eligible countries, you can now offer customers the option to buy now and pay later. So if you need a new website for whatever reason, go to squarespace.com for a free trial. And then when you're ready to launch the website you've created, you can go to squarespace.com/Dr. Becky to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or a domain. So thanks again to Squarespace. And now let's come back down to earth and chat about what's been happening in space news in the past month. Now, a big piece of news this month was the discovery of what could be the slowest spinning neutron star or pulsar that has ever been found, that has confused pretty much everybody in the astrophysics community. Neutron stars should spin at least once every second, but this one is only spinning once every 54 minutes. It is weird. So I made an entire video about that result to dive into more of the details with you. I'll link it in the video description down below, so make sure you check that out after watching this one. But it's also been a big month for space exploration as well, as we saw Boeing's Starliner capsule take astronauts to the International Space Station for the first time on the 6th of June. You can see how NASA's Suni Williams and Butch Wilmore had a very warm welcome when they finally arrived, because it has been quite the journey for Boeing. Like, they've had a very long and torturous development of Starliner with a lot of setbacks. Not least the fact after declaring that Starliner was ready for its first test with crew aboard, the launch was delayed by a month when the engineering team found like a faulty valve on one of the rockets, and then also a helium leak as well. Now, thankfully, that first crewed flight went very well and the astronauts made it to the International Space Station safely, but they weren't supposed to be there for very long. They were due to come back on the 19th of June to finish this crewed test flight. But during the launch, the crew reported a whole load of other mechanical faults with Starliner. Faults with 5 of the thrusters and also 5 more helium leaks that have been found. So now, at the time of filming, NASA and Boeing have said that the astronauts won't return before the 26th of June. And that's just to give them time to analyze all the data from the launch and from the Starliner capsule, just to check that it is actually safe to bring those astronauts home. Now, I'm an astrophysicist. I'm not a rocket scientist or an engineer, so I don't have the expertise to dive into, what's going on here and what's gone wrong. But Scott Manley has a great channel focusing on space exploration, and he has his fortnightly deep space updates videos, which I guess are like my Night Sky News videos that you should check out if you want more on Boeing and Starliner. Now, while we're on the engineering side of things, we've got to talk about the Hubble Space Telescope because it's getting old. It turned 34 this year and it's starting to show some wear and tear. Now, the astronomy community are well aware that we won't have Hubble forever, but it has well outlived its original planned lifespan. And NASA does have a plan to keep it working into the 2030s. Despite everything that's against them, from its orbital decay that we talked about in last month's Night Sky News video, and that I've gone into in more detail before in a video that, again, I'll link below for you if you're interested. But one of the biggest issues that keeps cropping up time and time again on Hubble is its gyroscopes. So you can think of a gyroscope as kind of like a spinning top that's nice and stable because it's spinning. But if you give it a little bit of a nudge, it starts to wobble. So on space telescopes, we use gyroscopes to know which direction the telescope is pointing. Because if you move it quickly, then gyroscope will wobble and you'll know about it. So we use it to get really precise pointing at a specific object and also to do a nice and controlled move of telescopes to point at different objects. Now, the Hubble Space Telescope has 6 gyroscopes on board, 3 of which have already failed in the past due to their age and wear and tear, which is fine because typically you only need 3 gyroscopes for precision operations. So one in the X, the Y, and the Z direction. So Hubble's still got 3 working gyroscopes and all was fine, except for the fact that in the past few months, one of those gyroscopes keeps returning faulty readings, what's known as saturation. So it keeps telling us that the telescope is moving at its maximum rate as it's moving to look at another target, despite whatever actual speed the telescope is moving at. Now, NASA have been able to reset the gyroscope a number of times over the past few months and get it back to like normal operations and giving us like the correct readings of the speed that the telescope is moving at. But the problem keeps on coming back. And every time that happens, it shuts down the telescope. It puts it into a safe mode, stops all science operations, and just waits for instructions from the ground. Which is what happened again on the 24th of May, which seemed to be the final straw for NASA, because on the 4th of June, they announced it was going to start work to transition the telescope from working with 3 gyroscopes to just 1 gyroscope. They've managed to do that, and science observations restarted in that mode on the 14th of June. Now, yes, it is more efficient to operate the telescope with 3 gyroscopes, but it is still possible with 1. From 2005 to 2009, the Hubble Space Telescope operated with 2 gyroscopes just fine, and it was back then in 2008 that they tested whether 1 gyroscope would be possible and found that there was no impact to science observations and operations. Of course, there are some constraints on how you can actually operate the telescope in terms of how fast you can now move it. And also with just 1 gyroscope, it won't be able to track objects that are any closer to us than Mars, asteroids, for example, but it's very rare that Hubble is ever used in that way. And as I've spoken about before on this channel, this was always NASA's plan for Hubble to keep it working as long as possible as the gyroscopes do start to individually fail. But who knows, they might get that faulty one back up and running. They're going to keep an eye on it all the time during these science operations, see what it's doing, get more data from it. And we could go back to operating in a 3 gyroscope mode, which would be more efficient. But the main takeaway here is that it's possible to operate with just 1 of the gyroscopes, and it's not going to impact any of the science we can do with Hubble. It just might happen on a slightly slower pace now. Shifting over to Mars now, and the Curiosity rover, which managed to capture these sparks of light caused when particles from a solar storm hit its camera. And then also the MAVEN satellite orbiting around Mars managed to capture the ultraviolet aurora caused by the same solar storm as well. So in last month's Night Sky News, I talked about the aurora seen much further south than normal here on Earth, and how that was caused by the sun entering what's known as its solar maximum, a period of really high activity in its magnetic field where we get lots of burps of high energy particles and radiation from the sun. Now, there's been a lot of these high energy burps in the last few weeks weeks. Some pointed towards Earth, resulting in the aurora that we saw on the 10th of May, and then some that were pointed towards Mars. Now, Mars doesn't have a magnetic field like we do here on Earth, so the aurora that you get on Mars are very different to that on Earth. On Earth, when one of these burps of high energy particles makes it to us, they get funneled by the magnetic field down to the poles, which is mostly where we see the aurora. But when those charged particles arrive at Mars, there's nothing to funnel them anywhere. So they hit into the entirety of the top of the atmosphere of Mars, impact with molecules in the Martian atmosphere and cause them to glow so that aurora are visible across the entire night side of Mars, which is what NASA's MAVEN orbiter detected. This is a time lapse of the night side of Mars between the 14th and the 20th of May 2024, and basically the brighter the purple colour that you can see here, the more UV light that was detected by MAVEN, and therefore the brighter the aurora were there. But the atmosphere of Mars is very, very thin, and a lot of the charged particles that were burped up by the sun actually made it to the surface of Mars as well, and they were detected by the camera on Curiosity rover, completely saturating the individual pixels on the camera when they hit it, so that as well as spotting a Martian wind gust sweep through, you also see these flashes of radiation. I mean, it looks pretty, but it's also really useful information because we can translate how many particles hit the camera to what was the radiation dosage that was received on the surface. And so if there had been astronauts there on the surface of Mars during this solar storm, they would have received a dose of radiation equal to 8,100 micrograys, or the equivalent of the same dosage that you'd get from 30 chest x-rays. Now, while that's not an instantly deadly dose, it's still the largest that's been detected by Curiosity since it landed 12 years ago as we get to this new solar maxima. So if we're going to think about seriously sending astronauts to Mars, then we're going to have to use these numbers that we've got in terms of the dosage of radiation to plan for things like shielding the astronauts' suits that they wear, but also any habitat that they live in as well. All right, on to the James Webb Space Telescope now, because once again, we've got a new claim of a record breaker, a new most distant galaxy known, with the light taking 13.4 billion years to get to us. Now, this was announced by the European Space Agency this month, along with this research paper by Carniani and collaborators, which, fair warning, is not yet peer-reviewed. And I think it's just because this field is moving so quickly, and this was public data from the JADE survey that this galaxy was found in. And so people are announcing results like this, especially record breakers, very, very quickly, rather than waiting for the slower peer review process of traditional academic publishing. Because the peer review process, it should take about 4 weeks-ish in theory, but in reality, it takes more like a few months. Here's the image, first of all, and you can see this object is actually 2 separate galaxies, and the one that we're interested in is this really red one. We know that that one's further away from us because of the effects of redshift. Light gets stretched to redder colors or longer wavelengths by the expansion of space itself, the expansion of the universe. So the longer that light has been traveling through the expanding universe, the more that light gets stretched out into redder colors and the redder an object appears in an image. So the JADE team essentially followed up on this galaxy using the near-spec detector on board JWST, which is what's known as a spectrograph, where you take the light from a galaxy and you split it into its rainbow of colors or its different wavelengths. So you get a trace of how much light at each color or wavelength of light you're getting from this galaxy. And what we look for in the spectra of distant galaxies to be able to pinpoint how far away they are is a very steep drop-off in the light, what we call a break in the light that's due to hydrogen gas in between us here on Earth and the distant galaxy, absorbing some of that light. So as the light passes through clouds of hydrogen gas in the universe, the hydrogen atoms like to steal away a very specific color or wavelength of light. But as the light travels, space is also expanding, so the light gets stretched to a longer wavelength, and that missing bit of light appears at a longer wavelength. But then the next gas cloud the light passes through steals away some more light, and so on until you have a lot of the light stolen away by these many clouds of hydrogen gas at these shorter wavelengths. And from how different those 2 wavelength measurements are, you can work out how much the light has been redshifted by. If you know the expansion rate of the universe, you can then work out how how long that light has been traveling through the universe for, i.e. how far away is that galaxy. So here's the spectrum for this new record breaker. The drop-off happens at a wavelength of around 1.8 microns, whereas hydrogen absorbs light at 121.567 nanometers, which if you plug into this equation, you work out gives you a redshift factor of 14.32, which means that the light has to have been traveling through the universe for 13.4 billion years to get to us. So we're seeing this galaxy as it was when the universe was just 300 million years old. That's incredibly early in the universe's history, the furthest back that we've ever seen, because this is a record breaker. That is if this stands up to peer review. Because the official spectrum release looks pretty convincing, but these things are always, beautified a little bit for public release. But if it does turn out that yes, the galaxy is at that distance and the data supports that, then that raises a whole other host of questions and has huge implications, because this galaxy is very bright, brighter than we think it should be for how far away it is, which means it's a lot more massive than we thought possible. How did something so big with so many stars form in just 300 million years of the universe's evolution? Now, Carniani and collaborators also reported that the shape of the spectrum suggested that there was some dust absorbing light in this galaxy. Dust, i.e. heavier elements formed in supernova that go on to clump together to make rocky planets, somehow existing that early in the universe's history. Like, so many generations of stars had to have lived, died, gone supernova, and spread the dust out, and then from the same gas cloud formed again, lived, died, gone supernova, spread the dust back out, for us to be able to actually detect that the dust is there and detect it on the shape of the spectrum that we see. So many more generations than we perhaps thought possible when we were working off the, previous best data that we had from the Hubble Space Telescope, which is obviously going to be limited because it can't see as far or as clearly as JWST can with the same resolution at that high of a redshift, that great of a distance. So, if it turns out that this galaxy is going to be the new record holder for the most distant galaxy known, we've got a whole lot of explaining to do for how that galaxy came to be. All right, that's it for night sky news for this month. As always, if you snap any pictures of the night sky, like of the Milky Way, or if you see any space news stories that you want me to cover in a future video, then send them my way over on social media. But until next time, everybody, happy stargazing. Sorry, I said hello so strongly, and all I can think about is Monty Darling gone as well, being like, hello, by looking up. What was that? The view of the sky out of this skylight right now while this plane goes overhead looks very like the Windows 95 desktops, neither of which sound particularly... I thought I muted you. Now it kind of looks like a squirrel. 5 of the thrusters? I thought I was confusing SpaceX and Boeing then. What's the SpaceX one that's similar? It's not Starliner, it's like Starship. That's it. Starships are meant to fly. Did you hear that dog bark outside? 2008, when they tested whether the one gyroscope mode would actually be possible. This dog, I thought it was one bark, but it's going crazy. I don't know where it's coming from. I don't know if it's down the street, next door, what? Record Baker. Baker? Who's afraid of JWST? You shouldn't be.